For more on Boeing, let's bring in Ernie Arvie, the president of AirInsight Group. He's previously called for Muilenburg to step down. Ernie, great to have you back.
Thanks, Melissa. Nice to be here again.
What to invest? I mean, if you take a look at the stock today, if the stock is up, we were talking about that. What do you think investors should know about this process that Boeing has in front of it to get the 737 MAX back in the air?
Well, I think the process has been delayed several times. They still haven't made the final submissions to the FAA, although if we believe Mr. Muilenburg, they're getting closer. But that still will take the FAA another 5 to 6 weeks to analyze after they get Boeing's final documentation. That puts us into next year or late into December, and the airlines will take probably 1 to 2 months each to get back into service. So the earliest we see is right about the end of the first quarter of next year, and more probably the second quarter, because there are a number of issues that have come up during that process that Boeing is addressing, as well as the fundamental problem with the MACS system.
People are so focused on Boeing and what Boeing can do to get that plane back in the air, Ernie, but in terms of the pressure on the FAA and the process by which it certifies aircraft, do you think that will have to change permanently and that could actually cause a longer path before the MAX gets back in the air?
I think the process will change. I think the review we've had with international regulators will be thorough enough that once the submission is made, the recertification process will probably go fairly smoothly. But for the next aircraft, for the 777X, for the new middle market aircraft that Boeing is doing, I think for those programs we'll see much more scrutiny from the FAA as the process changes. And I think the hole in the process right now is the Organizational Delegation Authority, the ODA, in which Boeing employees can certify certain requirements, and where they used to have a direct link to the FAA, now they report to the FAA through Boeing managers. So that clear voice of potential whistleblowing to the FAA has been eliminated, and that needs to change.
Hey, Ernie, it's Brian Kelly. So is there precedent for customer acceptance of this? How long do you think it'll take for somebody, for a client or a passenger to want to step back on to one of these planes?
We don't have a lot of data on that. We have to go back to 1979 in the DC-10, and that took about 6 months for passengers to get back on board that aircraft and have similar load factors. But that was before social media. So we don't have the word of mouth that we have today through the internet. We don't have Facebook. We don't have groups that could potentially put together an internet boycott of the airplane. So we don't yet know the answer. It could take a year before people get back on board this airplane, or longer. And if airlines find lower load factors, that's an economic cost to them versus the competing aircraft, and that's going to reduce the value of the Boeing aircraft to them.
We're just about out of time, Ernie, but we were talking about how investors are happy to stay in the stock, at least for now, because it is a duopoly out there. And I'm wondering, in your experience, how solid is that duopoly, and have you seen instances where airlines could actually switch to a different plane by a different plane maker?
The duopoly is pretty solid. It's difficult to switch if you're a major carrier with a large fleet, because there just aren't 100 delivery positions at Airbus available next year. You've got to get in line and wait 5 or 6 years. But for the smaller carriers who buy 2s and 3s, those can happen, and Airbus can certainly increase capacity. It's putting another line in for the A220. It's got its Alabama line ramping up. There is capacity in the system at the margins, but you're right. There simply is no alternative to Airbus or Boeing at this point until the Chinese and the C919 enter the market with full production, which is probably not till 2025.
Ernie, thanks for your analysis. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, Melissa.
Ernie Arvie. All right, so.
So we had last week there was a lot of downgrades, right? And I think the bear case was that they're only going to be producing about like low 40s per month, and the bull case was at somewhere upwards of the high 50s or something like that. And talking about getting that free cash flow back to those prior levels in the low to mid 40s, it's just a disaster for a couple of years, and that's one of the reasons why you bought this stock, because of that backlog, because of the free cash flow generation, and therefore the valuations just came down dramatically if you looked at a lot of the notes. So if they can't get get above 50 anytime early 2020, it's just a no touch, I think, right now.
Yeah, I think if you're buying Boeing here for a trade for 15 to 20% move, you're betting on no further headline risk, which I don't think any of us can say with any degree of certainty. And you're also betting on the fact that the market's going to continue to grind higher. So if you believe those two things, there's absolutely upside back to that 375 level, which if you go back and look, that's where we broke down from in the late winter, early spring of this year.
You just don't believe it.
I know I don't believe it.
And you don't believe it.
Well, I
And
just
you
think
don't
it's
believe
bad.
it.
I think it's bad risk reward, right?
Yeah.
So guys talking about the fact that if the market goes up, this stock goes up with it. Well, why wouldn't I just buy the market? Because I'm taking the exact same risk. And if there's a headline that, wait a second, this gets delayed for 6 months or a major carrier changes, I don't know what's going to happen. Boeing goes down and the market could still go up. So it's a lose-lose. It's just terrible risk reward in my view.
The key is that we don't have a gun to our heads to have to make this trade. So there
Right.
are other places we can make it and still have the same types of exposure.